Hello and thanks for stopping by. This is Gauntlet for the NES, released by Tengen in 1987, and I'm playing this off a cartridge on a retro USB AVS. This is the standard gray NES cartridge, not that oddball black one that was released by Tengen first. They're the same game though. Gauntlet was a successful arcade game in the mid-80s and sported 4 controllers to control 4 different character classes: Warrior, Valkyrie, Wizard, and Elf. The NES has all the characters, but can only be played 1 or 2 player. Overall, this is reasonably close to the arcade game. The colors are a little off, but this fundamentally feels similar enough. I think so anyway, and I enjoy playing this one. I remember many late nights playing this game with friends. I used to think that there was no actual end to the game, but there apparently is a final boss late in the game, if you hit level 100. I believe it's a 3-headed dragon, and pretty sure you can see that online somewhere. It takes some serious time to get that far. The arcade game apparently has no end and you just keep on looping. The game will offer you passwords here, which is great. If you pause the game, it will display a code, and you can write that one down. This will allow you to jump to the last cleared treasure room. However, you can do too well in this game, and eventually it will stop offering you a password. Basically, you collect treasure chests to try to progress your character, and every 15 or 100 chests it'll increase your maximum power level. When you pass through the next treasure room, if you can get to the exit, your power level will be restored to that new amount. Power level is basically a combination of health, and it's basically also a timer. It always is dropping slowly, and it drops faster when you start taking damage. If you can find and eat food along the way, of course, you'll regain some of this power. There are fundamental differences between the different characters, and it's important to note these. They have 4 different stats, each of them, and between each character they do vary. The different stats are offense, magic, speed, and armor. Warrior has the highest offense, the Elf has the fastest speed, Wizard has the highest magic power, and Valkyrie has the highest armor. Each one of these characters is weaker in some area, and I won't go through all the other stats, but overall, they juggle the stats to balance out the characters. I would say the Valkyrie is probably the most balanced, but I prefer the offense of the Warrior. One of the problems with the Warrior, though, is you can't shoot at an angle through 2 bricks that are close together, so that's kind of frustrating. In any case, it's probably an easier game with 2 players, and certainly it's a lot of fun to play with a friend. So this is a gigantic level crawl on the NES, and the controls are relatively simple. The A button fires your weapon from a distance. If you run into creatures up close, without pressing your button you will damage them, but you will take damage at the same time. The B button uses magic, if you've collected magic potions. Magic or magic potions, these are bombs basically, and they'll damage everything on screen. The higher your magic power, the more enemies you'll damage or eliminate. These are useful to get out of jams, you probably shouldn't use them at random. There are also other potion types and upgrades you can get while playing, and these will raise your different statistics as you play. You can get faster, or get extra magic power, or things like that. So we have a ton of levels filled with various enemy types. Mixed in with the enemies, eventually you'll see some sort of a generator. It's usually a box. Sometimes it's like a skull and crossbones on the ground. These are items that constantly spawn enemies. So, if you started a level that's relatively empty of creatures, and if you were to just sit there and wait, it will eventually fill in with creatures. So you should destroy these generators when you can. Usually you won't wait around too long in a level for everything to respawn. Mostly the game is you racing for the exit as quick as possible. Okay, exits. There can be multiple exits for a level. They're clearly marked when you get them. It's a white square, it says exit on it. But sometimes there are multiple exits for a level, and sometimes extra exits might exist and they could be hidden. Sometimes you have to shoot a wall to uncover it. So you have to destroy or crawl through a ton of creatures to get to the exits, and plowing through creatures will certainly do damage to you. So, when you start a level, if there are gaps in the level with no creatures, you want to race through those open spots to get to the tougher spots. If you wait, they'll start to spawn and fill in the space, and it'll make it more difficult for you. Basically, that's what the game is. The longer you wait, the harder it's going to be in the long run. The levels will naturally create bottlenecks at various places, and you'll eventually adjust and get good at leveraging the shape of the map after a while. If you leverage certain spots, they'll help you thin out the opposition, get through the game with less damage taken. In this game, you will encounter bonus treasure rooms every now and then. These rooms don't have enemies in them, just treasure, and somewhere in the map is an exit. You have limited time on these levels, so your job is to race around and find the exit before the time runs out. If you find the exit and escape before the timer runs out, you'll have your power replenished to your maximum, whatever that is. It's a good idea to find the exit first. Don't jump into one of these levels and say, oh, treasure, and just start collecting every treasure you can. Honestly, you should ignore every piece of treasure immediately and just scour the map until you can physically see the exit. At that stage, you have to make a determination how much time you have, and then you use the remaining time to pick up as many chests in that area as possible. It's more important to get out of the exit than it is to pick up treasure. I'm going to repeat that in a slightly different way. If you got to a treasure room and picked up 0 treasures, but made it to the exit, that's more valuable than picking up treasures and not hitting the exit. Definitely. On the later levels, these treasure rooms get even more complex. You will find that you don't even have time to pick up treasures, and whatever 1 or 2 treasures you manage to pick up, you're just lucky that you ran into them. Eventually, the regular levels get pretty cluttered. Potions and keys are very valuable, so you need to do your best to collect as many as possible to use in future levels. You always want to try to have a few in your possession for emergencies. As you run around the maze, you want to pay attention to places that you might not be able to access right away because it's behind the other side of a wall. You want to pay attention because places you can't access immediately, eventually you might be able to piece together a path to get you to those areas, and that's how you're going to get extra keys, potions, and food. Just keep an eye out, pay attention to what's going on around you, it'll make things easier. Keys are valuable. They'll allow you to get to different exits or parts of mazes that are blocked by doors. If it costs you 1 key to get 1 piece of food, you're prioritizing food over the key. If you don't need the energy, you're probably wasting a key. If you have plenty of keys, this may or may not be okay, you're rolling the dice. 1 key for 1 key is clearly a wash, so no harm, but if you can use 1 key to get multiple, that's valuable. Keys can also be used to open certain locked treasures, and sometimes in those treasure chests that you unlock, there are really valuable upgrades. When you press B, it's basically a damage bomb, and you should try to save these for as long as possible. They're very valuable later on in the game, especially when things get really cluttered. When Death shows up later in the game, he will drain a ton of your power. He's this little Grim Reaper guy. He doesn't die with the regular shot. If you see one of these, you should run away completely, or you could use a potion to defeat him. I always thought this game starts to feel really good when you get past maybe the first or second treasure level. Make sure to press pause after these sections and write down your passwords after you get that level completed. For a game for so many levels, you want to be able to pick up the game down the road and skip a bunch of levels. It doesn't necessarily get you to exactly where you want to go, but it's going to get you pretty close. You'll appreciate not having to start over at level 1, I promise you. This game has 100 levels. Anything you could do to cut off some levels is good. This is not a story game. You're not unfolding any sort of a plot. You're just moving through a massive dungeon to get to the last level as best and fast as you can. This is really just a sit and grind game, and if you're a fan of the arcade game, the NES version is a decent enough version. Apparently, all of these levels were built exclusively for the NES. Well, that's all I have for Gauntlet for the NES. Thanks for giving this one a watch, and I'll catch you next time.